Welcome back to the Criminal Connection and the King of Clubs weekly series. I hope you're enjoying it. Hope you're sharing, liking and commenting and telling all your friends about it because it's the best content we've had on here. Well, I would say that, but no, I'm biased. This week's episode, we actually talk about my old mate, Dave Courtney, rest in peace. Chapter 10, Gangsters, Pranksters and Raving Lunatics. Terry's Guide to Being a Gangster. Number 1. Befriend a load of gangsters and start hanging around with them. Number 2, start believing you're a gangster too and do silly things for them that you don't get paid for. Number 3, get shot dead or seriously hurt or end up in jail. My guide isn't really as comprehensive as it should be, but based on my experiences of most wannabe gangsters, it's the guide that most of them seem to have followed. Of course, the real gangsters tend not to go around telling people they're gangsters until they've retired or come out of jail. And the above guide does not really apply to them. It's not about a salary, it's all about reality, says KRS-One in My Philosophy. My philosophy is slightly different. It has got to be about both. I'd have been a raver, but I wouldn't have worked in the rave industry if it wasn't for the money. In fact, sometimes the money wasn't even worth all the aggravation we went through, although I'd have never admitted it at the time. To be honest, I was making money out of something I loved, so I couldn't just walk away from it. The bottom line when it comes to being a gangster is that you hang around in a gang. The gang will be involved in organised crime in some way, and that is the basic framework that we all know from reading any crime books, gangster books, and watching any films about crime. In the UK, we probably got 2 main perceptions of gangsters, archetypes, both media generated. Exhibit A, Your Honour. The American phenomenon, born out of Prohibition, the smart, suited type, immortalised by Robert De Niro playing Al Capone in The Untouchables. These are the old school gangsters. You've seen the updated version in Goodfellas, and I'm sure you've all quoted Joe Pesci's funny house scene to your mates in a pub. You've watched them in Casino and you wanted to set up and run your own place in Las Vegas. We all have. No wonder kids think that crime is glamorous. Henry Hill in Goodfellas. Ever since I was a young boy, I always wanted to be a gangster. It was all about the cars, expensive suits, and the women it attracted. Young geezers making stacks of money and enjoying themselves. Of course they were breaking the law, but they didn't care, did they? And we all followed their stories because we were intrigued by them. They were bad men, but we didn't exactly despise them, did we? The British version started with Ron and Reg Kray. They weren't the first, but they are the ones that we remember because they became icons of the 1960s. Their look and style was influenced by the likes of Al Capone and George Raft. And you read about them in a really great book called The Profession of Violence. And in the thousands of other My Dad Knew Someone Who Knew Someone Who Knew Someone Kray books. The Krays were folk heroes, but also feared at the same time. The Richardsons were a lot scarier, although the Krays were the most famous. This was probably the first time that we saw criminals in the UK mix with the rich and famous, film stars, pop stars, even royalty. Ronnie and Reggie Kray became the first celebrity gangsters, and they in turn manipulated the media very well. There aren't many people who don't think of that David Bailey photograph with Ron peering over Reg Kray's shoulder when they think of the name Kray. The main thing that I admire about the old school gangsters and the mafia is that they all had honour. They all had respect. You know, they'd sit down and discuss problems and at least try to sort it out with words before resorting to bullets. Their whole ethos was about knowing people and influencing via a friend of a friend network. They always had style and an image that sits in time, and they all really cared about how they looked. I love the irony of the fact that by putting on a suit, they become gentlemen. Brilliant. Exhibit B, the Bloods and the Crips of LA. It's not gangster anymore with this lot, it's gangster. These are the new school, if you like. You saw them in Boys in the Hood and Colours and realised that gangbanging had another meaning. That song, Straight Outta Compton by NWA, grabbed you by the bollocks. And you all went out and bought that 2001 album by Dr. Dre. I bet You even quite fancied one of those huge cars with a bouncy suspension where you'd be going like that down the road. And I bet you even tried drinking Hennessy cognac because Dr. Dre and Exhibit rapped about it. It's another concept that drifted over from America. The likes of Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg come from these gangs before making it big. You know, they rapped about life on the street, shooting people, and gangster rap was born. It's a very negative image, you know, but we see it in the news all the time with words such as guns, drugs, and violence following closely behind. Take a walk through Dalston or Peckham back in the day, or the back streets of Birmingham, Manchester, or Bristol, and you'll see those garage kids walking around when they're not shooting people up with their reactivated Mac 10s. For the mainstream, there's been films like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, Snatch, and in 2006, Rolling with the Nines, one of the least PC and most violent movies made in the past 20 years. It's actually a great film. It was only my second film, but I think I'm a little bit biased. I play one of the lead roles. More on that later. None of these films promote a gangster lifestyle. It all looks great at the start, but there's always a downfall. There's always a moral message. Over the years, I've seen and mixed with nearly every type of criminal or gangster that you care to mention. I've been labelled as one by people who don't even know me. In the work I've done over the years, I've always had to have a team with me. This is probably where all the misconceptions started from, and they followed me around ever since. It's a little bit like a curse, you know, being young and successful with a nice car and a nice house meant that I was either a gangster, an up to no good, or a drug dealer. There is no middle ground, it seems. When you're walking around knocking on doors with a bunch of big, tasty looking, flat-nosed geezers, people are going to definitely put two and two together and get 26. Looking at it from an outsider's view, you know, people will always think you're up to no good, regardless of what you are actually doing. And to be honest, it's not like we were knocking on doors selling Bibles. So maybe they had a slight point. In the beginning of doing the raves, I did do a little bit of debt collecting, which is a job that usually requires more than one person. It was only a few years later when debt collecting was about intimidation. These days, debt collections are civilized and they have a chat with their clients. You know, the world's gone mad. One of my good mates makes a lot of money as a debt collector. He's civilized and polite, but will turn really nasty if anybody takes the piss. He was recovering some money from a geezer not too long ago. He owed a substantial amount of money, and when my mate met him to pick it up, the guy came out with, "What will you do if I decide not to pay you?" This was slightly puzzling. I mean, they'd already talked it over a few times, and this meeting was literally just to pay the debt, and that would be the end of it. So my mate says, "Are you telling me you're not going to pay now?" "Why? Will you knock me out if I don't pay?" asked the geezer. "Are you going to pay me this fucking money or not?" "No." Bang. One punch and the guy was unconscious. My mate then patted the guy down and took the money from his pocket as he lay there. It was already in an envelope. I mean, what was this guy thinking? For me, really, what debt collecting was about, it was just an extension of door work. Because people knew that we had a little crew around us, they come occasionally and asked if we could sort out some trouble. I get calls asking if I'd pick up some money that was owed to people, and I did all right by it. There was a club in Camberley in Surrey called the Agincourt where me and my mate Joe Johnson used to work on the door. At this time, I was in my early 20s, very aggressive and up for anything. And, well, Joe was as mad as a sack of monkeys. And when people owed money and had no way of getting it, they'd come to us and ask us to do it because back then, you know, we didn't give a fuck. The combination of being young, with a reputation to uphold, and the responsibility of having to get results was pretty dangerous, to be honest. There's actually a fine line between collecting a debt and actually terrorising some poor fucker. If I ever collected it and if they ever told me they could not or would not pay up, the usual approach would be to threaten them for the payment on the next visit. If they still couldn't or wouldn't pay, I'd have to carry out that threat. If I phoned someone and told them to pay up, I'd tell them I was and to look me up. And if they needed to, then give me a call back and tell me if they're going to pay or not. They wouldn't get lippy once they knew who I was and who was with me. If all they was expecting was a punch in the mouth, it may just be worth taking the chance of non-payment. But if they thought they might be driven somewhere and have holes drilled into their kneecaps, they'd usually pay up. No problem. In this scenario, the threat of violence is far worse than the actual violence itself. It was really about frightening people. Debts were usually around £10,000 and we get offered 30% to collect it. But that was just loose change compared to what I started earning from the raves. So I was actually wasting my time doing it. And to be completely honest, I really didn't want to get involved with other people's problems, which is really what debt collecting is. You have to be a full-time people hater, and I'm quite the opposite. Terrorism and aggravation are two things that I don't like. I'd gone from playing the part of a thug to actually being one. If I didn't watch out, I'd end up going down that wrong road and get involved in being a criminal. There's a load of people out there who'd love to be thought of this way, but I'm the absolute opposite. If I'd have wanted to get involved in crime or be a gangster, I could have easily been one. My CV had all the right qualifications and I knew enough of them to say, I'm up for a job, but I was just not that way inclined. I've seen so many proper mugs, not just in the club world or in the music game, trying to be Johnny Big Bananas, walking the walk and unable to talk the talk. It's actually a pretty sad sight. My initiation to the London underworld came after Ronnie Krays' funeral back in 1995. All the papers covered that funeral and they were all full of one name, Dave Courtney. Described as a top London gangster in all the media reports, the hair to the Krays. I mean, he certainly looked the part, surrounded by hundreds of heavies and taking care of security for this huge East End Gangsters event. Dave was overseeing everything. He was absolutely in his element. It made his name and he basically became the new face of British crime. One thing about Dave, he wasn't exactly media shy, and documentaries and magazine articles followed as he introduced himself to a brand new audience and quickly became a marketable brand. No one had really heard of British gangsters since the Essex boys were murdered in that Range Rover and the Krays and the Richardsons in the 60s. So this geezer was an associate of theirs, quick-witted and with the personality of a criminal come entertainer. He took the Krays' invention of a celebrity criminal that stepped further to boldly go where no other gangster had gone before. So we decided we'd interview his girlfriend Jenny for the Scene magazine, which was going at the time. She was basically making a name for herself as a rapper, and with Dave attracting so much publicity, she could use all this to her advantage. I actually went along to the interview because I was really interested in actually meeting with Dave, as I'd always been fascinated by the Krays, and we got talking. He asked me what I did for a living, and his eyes lit up when I told him about the raves. To say he was interested would be an understatement. He was absolutely itching to get into the scene as much as he could. We both got on really well. We come from similar backgrounds, knew a lot of the same people, and both being on the club scene, we shared some of the same interests. I also knew that he'd boxed in the past and was quite fond of a row. What else would you look for in a new acquaintance? As our friendship progressed, he started writing for the magazine, and we gave him a regular column in the Scene magazine called Dodgy Dave's Funny Rave Page, where he just wrote any old bollocks. You're starting to get a feel for regular magazine features. It gave him a nice platform to mouth off about whatever he wanted to, adding his unique style and allowing his personality to shine through. So many people used to look forward to their dodgy columnist rantings and ravings and would always fast forward to the back of the book, to the back pages to see what Dodgy Dave had been up to each month. There were a few editions where we had to change the title to Dodgy Dave Live from the Inside every time where he'd been locked up. This particular occasion, he'd been put in remand in Her Majesty's Prison Belmarsh for something or other. I can't even remember what it was. I've still got copies of the magazine, and I was looking for them recently, reading Dave's pages. From what he was writing, you would absolutely think he was an absolute nutcase. Well, there's only a few more money-spunking days till fucking Christmas. I've stolen the kids some nice presents this year. I hit the old checkbook and card well hard, and whoever the poor bastard is that owns it now owes the bank a good few £1,000. Dave even sent a fat, moody cheque to the Police Widows Christmas Fund for a laugh. This was the sort of mad shit that Dave would do. He actually came to a few of our raves and he'd always rock up with all his boys. There was a huge fucking posse of them. And looking back, it was funny. I mean, Dave really knew how to make an entrance. A lot of people in the scene and the clubs knew who he was through that funeral thing alone in the national press. And being the most conspicuous person you're ever likely to come across, no one could miss that Dave Courtney was in the house. Dave met all of their security team, and of course he could see immediately that I had respect and that my firm wouldn't be with me if I was just some idiot. He actually knew a few of the guys, and it definitely was a show of strength, and I could see Dave's mind was ticking, thinking, fuck me, where did he find this lot? Neither of us being stupid, we worked out that we could use each other to our mutual advantage. We got chatting seriously one night and came to an agreement. I could use his name and growing reputation as backup. If people knew I was mates with him, it would sort out and stop a lot of the potential trouble that was always never far away, with jealous rivals, dickheads trying it on for protection, and drug dealers trying to muscle in. To be honest, we could cope with them by ourselves, but being connected to Courtney might mean we never even had to. I mean, we had some scary geezers on side, and having his name behind us would definitely help keep the shit away. It made me probably a little bit more well-known in London, where I'd always been conscious that I was an outsider from a sleepy little village in Surrey called Camberley. From Dave's point of view, you know, he could come along to the raves, have a good time, be noticed and build up his reputation. So we shook hands and we had a drink on it. Dave was my first real contact within the criminal fraternity. He proved to be a really good guy to know most of the time. I was invited to lots of parties, boxing dues, and I probably met pretty much all the villains of, you know, the 60s and 70s and the 80s. Top people like Wilf Pine, Roy Shaw, Freddie Foreman, Tony Lambriano, Charles Richardson, Bruce Reynolds, the Nashes, Joey Pyle, Frankie Fraser. There's so many names. I never ever did any business with any of them, but they were all interesting guys, all time served in their trades and well respected throughout the underworld. And now, although most of them were retired and enjoying the world of, you know, this sort of celebrity gangsterism, I really enjoyed meeting them. They were like my type of people. And of course, it suited me and my career at the time to actually know them. I'd sit and watch the civvies and the groupies at these events, you know, coming up, wanting to buy them drinks, have their photos taken with them. It was actually a great place for networking. And as with Dave, we had a lot in common. Okay, I wasn't a criminal mastermind or a convicted murderer. The club scene and debt collecting shares common threads with the world of organised crime. I spent night after night swapping stories and getting along with the cream of crime. And it all helped build my network up. I know it sounds like a bit of a contradiction, but they were actually a decent bunch of guys. You know, they'd all been around in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and they all had a great sense of humour about their businesses and used to regale me with stories of, you know, things long gone. Most gangsters today are generally just want to be cunts with guns, crackheads in hoodies. I mean, they just do not compare to the romantic version of the boys in the 60s. Of course, these guys were every bit as likely to shoot you in the face or cut your stomach open, but they'd done it with style and with a nice suit on. One of the old school guys that I got to know, that I stayed really close to because he really impressed me, and that was my old mate, Wilf Pine. R.I.P. Wilf. Wilf was super intelligent, proper gentleman, and he would never, ever bullshit you. He's probably one of the best cooks I've ever met. He was a genuine bloke, and he's respected the world over because of it. I think he's still the only Englishman reputed to be a made man in the mafia, according to US law enforcement agencies anyway. When I met him, it was over a situation where someone was accused of basically being a rat and he wanted to see me. We sat down and discussed it, and everything was smoothed out. From that day on, we become really good friends. I still saw him regularly up until when he died, and I've known him for 20 years. He's been able to vouch for me on more than one occasion, and he's the only person I know of who can arrange anything for you anywhere on the planet. Unlike most of the gangster fraternity that I met through Dave, Wilf had never got a criminal record, and he'd never been to jail, never done any time, so he's as clean as a whistle. As our friendship grew, Wilf became kind of like a father figure to me, really, and I'm honoured that he always called me the son he never had. Phoning me up, and he used to say, "Teddy, it is your Jewish father calling. How are you?" I mean, that doesn't happen with anyone else. And he really was the nicest bloke you could ever meet. but you just would never, ever want to cross this fella. I actually remember saying to him once, I wish I'd met you when I was 16 or 17, you know. And he replied with, no, you fucking well done. And we both laughed for too long. He was probably right. I mean, fuck knows what kind of trouble we'd have got ourselves into. Some of the American guys that I met through Wolf are all pretty heavy duty. I've been to the best restaurants and the best clubs with them. And each time we'd always get the best table, the best service, and the chef would always come out to see us. It really is a good fella's world. One time when I was over in Vegas with Jeremy Bailey, Wolf set up some friends of his and they really made sure we got the VIP treatment. There was a restaurant where all the stars went and you had to book up months in advance to eat there. If you know the right people though, you could just stroll in and get the best table in the house. And that is exactly what we did. Follow me, please, Mr. Turbo. We've been expecting you. Sounds like a James Bond film. So we sat down and we're having a look round, sussing out the menu. When the waiter came over with the telephone, it's for you, Mr. Turbo, sir. It was one of our American mates. I thanked him for getting us in. And he said it was their pleasure to help us. And then said, make sure we take care of the waiter. Introducing a proper raw men's fashion brand that has untamed energy inspired by relentless warriors while remaining cheeky and rebellious. Simeon Saboteur is not just about style. This brand is a movement and a rebellion against the ordinary. This clothing is crafted for those that face life head on. Our new collection fuses classic design with modern edge. If you want to express your true warrior identity, strength and boldness, then join our tribe of real modern men. Explore our collection of casual wear, active gear and statement pieces that are as unique as you are. Our new collection is now live, and as a special treat for our Criminal Connection podcast crew, use this fantastic discount code BANANA5 on the checkout for an exclusive 5% discount off your first order. Visit www.simeonsaboteur.com. Check them out in the link below. Hang on, you want me to take care of the waiter? I asked. Yeah, man, take care of the guy. What, like, take care of him? Are you sure? There was a few seconds silence, then roaring laughter. Terry, you fucking crazy maniac. Tip the guy. Don't fucking bury him in the desert. Of course, the waiter was listening and probably gave us the best service he'd ever given in his life. It was an amazing night on an amazing trip, courtesy of a more than amazing friend. It's great that people say they back you up, and even better when they actually do it. I'd just taken a new place on a little while back. It was like a nice, classy restaurant. It was a new venture, and I was keen to make it happen. We'd not been in business that long when some geezers come in one day and thought it'd be a good idea to start taking photos inside and out and making the staff feel really nervous. The manager actually saw one of them walk up to where the office was, and he was taking pictures, and the manager said to him, you know, were you lost? And they were like, yeah, sorry, I was looking for the toilet. I mean, were these guys for real? He moved them on, but then when they left, he made a note of their registration. It was quite a rare top-of-the-range motor, so I knew it wouldn't be too hard to find some info on the owners. I made a few calls, and I found out that they were a pair of notorious armed robbers and were obviously on a reconnaissance mission to do my place over. I phoned Wolf, and he soon traced them through friends of ours. As luck would have it, someone paid those two would-be robbers a visit, and it was made pretty clear that they should definitely wipe my restaurant details off their fucking to-do list and never, ever step foot in there again. Funnily enough, we haven't seen them since. That was it. Problem sorted with a few phone calls, a result from using the old boys network. With anything like that, I could always ask Wolf for any favour, and he would always help me out. I mean, he would do anything for a mate, especially his Jewish son. He was giving me advice on a weekly basis, and he's never once asked for anything in return. It isn't a favour for me, a favour for you, deal with him. He's just a straight-up guy and someone I'm proud to call my friend. Meanwhile, Dave, Courtney and I had some real laughs together. In October 97, we held our biggest Garage Nation party at the GMX in Manchester in partnership with Fantasia. It was the biggest house and garage event that year, and there was 15,000 people there, and it was one of the best nights ever. Fantasia did most of the organisation, so me and the boys were able to go up there and have a great night. We hired a minibus and took Dave along, and we checked into this lovely 5-star hotel in the centre of Manchester where all the DJs were staying, the likes of Carl Cox, Paul Oakenfold and Sasha, with loads of models and other celebs. Dave called us into his room half an hour later after we'd all checked in. He had a holder on the bed. Right, boys, you know what these fucking northern cunts are like, don't you? For guns and fucking violence and shit. There's no fucking way we're going anywhere here without the proper tools. So he opens this bag up and empties the contents on the bed. There was Uzis, Mac 10s, 357 Magnums, 9mm semi-automatics, Smith & Wesson 38s, the fucking works. Everybody's eyes popped out and he started cackling and laughing like a hyena. They're only imitations. I'm only fucking about, we took these off of a film set. But he did insist on taking a Mac 10 along to the party just for a piss take. So when he walked in to see what the doorman would say, obviously when we arrived, it set the metal detector off. The doorman was doing a double take. Dave, sorry, you can't bring that in here. What are you on about? I ain't fucking going anywhere without it. Sorry, but Dave, relax. I'm having a laugh, you cunt. We all pissed ourselves. Back at the hotel, and we're all sitting in the lobby, and the lift comes down, and the doors open, and this huge fuck-off firework display starts fucking happening. There's rockets, explosions, fucking sparklers, everything's going off everywhere, and everyone's diving for cover. Courtney, again. I mean, you could almost hear him fucking laughing his head off in the background. So we all got on well. But we were never really like close mates or anything. And after a while, unfortunately, we drifted apart. I'd stopped going to the sort of gangster parties. Dave was always great company, but unfortunately brought a lot of baggage and aggravation with him. And he probably did it without meaning to, you know. Imagine my surprise then when I started hearing on the grapevine a year or so later that I had another partner called Dave Courtney Esquire. Apparently, he'd been going around telling everyone who would listen that he was running my raves, which was kind of more than I bargained for when we'd agreed to sort of use each other's names for mutual benefit. I mean, fuck me, I'd learned that lesson with Letraset Mark and his mate Andy and Phil and Mick, the Tottenham geezers, who I did the Rocket with. Apart from Jason K, rest in peace, the one thing I didn't want or need was any other partners, especially one who was so fucking secret, even I didn't know about it. Worse still, he brought out a book called Raving Lunacy, in which he continued saying that he was my business partner. You maybe actually wondered, like, why I was bothered. Well, Dave, being the type of person he is, had sent copies to a lot of top people, including the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Paul Condon, the HMRC, and the Queen, for fuck's sake. I'm sure at the time he thought it was hilarious. And I'd have seen the funny side myself if it had been about anybody else. But the real fucking problem was he made up a load of stuff about me in the book. When he was writing the book, he said, oh, you know, I'm doing this book about the rave scene. I'm going to mention a few bits about One Nation, Garage Nation, blah, blah, blah. Is that okay? And I was like, yeah, sure, you know, because he did come to the raves and we were mates, you know. But these stories were a lot fucking different in print, sadly. There I am in his book, named and shamed as being in the car when Dave had some like crazed gunfight, you know, something like Starsky and Hutch. And for the record, it was all bollocks. I never was in any car with anybody with any kind of guns or gun battles, you know. I was a businessman. I was putting events on in licensed venues, you know. I was earning a good living, being the face of a successful dance music organisation. I wasn't fucking Ned Kelly. Why on earth would I be driving around with Dave getting shot at? More important than it being untrue, it was basically accusing me of committing a fucking serious criminal offence. And obviously at the time I did have a firearms licence, so I did not want the old bill nosing around me any more than anybody else does. And they might have even thought there was a ring of truth to it, because I did have a Browning 9mm pistol, perfectly legit, and the cops knew that because they were involved in the licensing process. I actually had a right go at Dave at the time, you know, when the book came out, but he just laughed it off, which kind of really disappointed me. Even so, you know, I could have laughed it off myself eventually if it hadn't have caused me all the fucking grief. You could almost hear the taxman and the VAT man chatting. Have you read this book that Dave Courtney sent us? Dave who? Dave Courtney, yeah, the notorious hardcore criminal, the heir to the Krays, the gangster. Oh, no, I haven't read it. What does it say? Oh, it just says there's some geezer called Terry Turbo who's his business partner. Well, if Turbo's his business partner, he must be a criminal as well. You know, and do hardcore criminals and gangsters pay their taxes and VAT bills? No, do they fuck? Well, we should have a close look at Mr. T Turbo. In fact, let's spin the cunt. So they launched a full-scale investigation into me and my business. It's actually the oldest trick in the book. Tax dodging brought Capone down after all. I actually thank the Lord I'd always taken the decision to go proper legit. Everything I'd ever earned was scrutinised. I mean, they turned my house over. They went through my bank accounts. They went through my paperwork. They went through my business accounts. And at the time, you know, raves were a cash business and they were crawling all over me, looking for the tiniest mistake or something that didn't quite balance up correctly. What they were really looking for is payments to Dave. At first, I just thought I'd been unlucky to get a pull and didn't really put two and two together, but they kept asking me if I had a business partner. No. Are you sure? Yeah. Really sure? Utterly, totally, fucking, completely, 100% sure. Really? Yeah. Really? Why do you keep banging on about it? Have you read the book? Have I read what book? Dave Courtney's book. He says you're his partner in it. Well, with a friend like that, who the fuck needs any enemies? My accountant at the time, Francis, was an absolute diamond. First, she squared the customs and excise and inland revenue away. I'd always been straight. I'd always paid my tax. And between us, we proved it. And that was that. Then she set me even straight on how things had to be from here on in. Even though you and I know you're honest, she said, they don't believe it. They're going to be on your case from now on. They're going to look at every penny you handle. They'll probably sit up over the road from one of your events and they will probably be clicking in how many people are coming in. They're going to go around the record shops. They're going to be checking how many tickets you're selling. You know, they're going to be going in the clubs to see how many drinks were, you know, how much money was being spent over the bar. They're going to work out the numbers, right? And they're going to keep looking to make sure that you're being on the straight and narrow. And they'll investigate everybody you're in business with. They'll turn over all the DJs. They'll probably tap your phone. They'll be all over your bank accounts. And they will probably be fucking following you. Fuck me. I might as well change my name to Terry Capone. Everybody who's in business, right, at that time would take a bit of cash, right? And if they say they don't, they're either stupid or fucking liars. Now, there was a third category, me. If I wasn't careful, I could get fucked over and lose everything. If you take £30,000 in on a night, said Francis, you can't even take £50 out for your petrol home unless you put it through the books. At the time, you know, I sort of racked my brains. I really tried to understand Dave's motive. You know, maybe in his own way, he was trying to big me up and earn me a reputation as a face. I mean, I don't know. But whatever. I didn't want the reputation or the heat that goes with being a face. If he'd have asked, you know, Terry, do you mind if I make up a story about us driving along and having a shootout in my book? I'd have asked him, you know, what the fuck he was on. I mean, even if it was true, it's not something you want somebody to fucking write and put in a book or anybody knowing about. I mean, don't get me wrong. Dave was a solid geezer and he certainly can have a row. I'm not disputing that. He was also a well-known debt collector and had a lot of respect on the street. But even after all of this stuff, I still remain friends with him. We're not as close as we used to be. And he helped me out of lots of situations in the past. He's collected money for me and proved that he was a mate in many ways. Dave was always a likeable geezer and a great laugh. You know, he'd drop you in the shit and offer you a drink in the next breath. To be honest, you know, this whole fucking celebrity gangster thing caused me a lot of grief. You know, I can sort of laugh about it now because outside of a few proper people, it's all bullshit. You know, some of the supposed gangster stuff that goes on was and still is hilarious. There's internet forums now where all these people take sides and argue with each other about who is the top gangster, you know, who is a grass, who isn't a real gangster, who is the hardest man in London, who's an informant. I mean, you know, it's fucking mental, you know, rumours, Chinese whispers and lies have always kept people fighting at each other's throats. The main thing that the internet done is just provided a quicker and bigger way to spread it around. There are enough gangster stories that have been circulating for years. You know, people have been interviewed on TV about them and have actually told porkies to better their own reputation. With so much bollocks and falseness, it's little wonder that people see that lifestyle as full of petty, squabbling, backstabbing and fucking wannabes, telling lies and bullshitting everyone. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble on about my experiences in the club scene. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you're liking, I hope you're leaving a message below, and I hope you're subscribing, and we will see you next week on the other side.